there are major chances of an unintended escalation that could absolutely spiral out of control. Hezbollah leaders are operating in the open and they are far more vulnerable to being picked up by this artificial intelligence software of the Israeli Mossad. Nobody wants an escalation even now. Not Iran, not even the Hezbollah, and not the Americans. Escalation may suit Netanyahu right now. Will accidental escalation happen nevertheless? The wars in the Middle East and in Ukraine are both careening towards their critical mass. They are reaching a critical mass almost simultaneously, almost concurrently. Now, let's focus on the situation in the Middle East. It is a powder keg, and there are major chances of an unintended escalation that could absolutely spiral out of control. That is the oil cockpit of the world, and a major escalation of conflict there would send the prices of oil skyrocketing, devastate the global economy. The United States economy is already was said to have entered recession, and this kind of a hit when we are emerging from the penumbra of COVID and emerging from the shock of the Ukraine war and its spiraling oil prices in 2022, this could be a global disaster of unmitigated proportions. So what exactly is the source of the current escalatory spiral and which way will it go? To cut to the chase, let me quickly recapitulate that Haniyeh had gone to Tehran, and while he was the state guest in Tehran, he was assassinated. And that sent shock waves, and Iran has vowed to that it will retaliate. So the whole question now is, what form will that retaliation take? How will Israel respond? How will the United States and NATO respond? And what are the chances of an accidental escalation? And if that happens, what form will that take? So firstly, let's get to the assassination of Haniyeh. There are many theories on how it was done. One of the immediate first theories that was aired was that an F-35 Israeli Air Force aircraft had flown parallel to the border of Iran, and from there on a standoff range had fired a cruise missile, probably the French cruise missile, which hit this building where Haniyeh was staying and killed him along with his bodyguard. That's number one. It's quite improbable because that would have, implied overflight over the territories of Saudi Arabia, Jordan, etc., which without American support, Israel could not have, pulled that off. And the simple fact is that it would also have required mid-air refueling, which is again beyond the capabilities of Israel. It can only do that with American support, and therefore this theory was ruled out. The second was a far more plausible theory that an anti-tank guided missile with a standoff range of about 6 to 7 kilometers had been used to get a clear line of sight to this guest house in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard complex, very highly guarded complex close to Tehran, on the outskirts of Tehran. And with his ATGM line of sight, he'd been able to hit that, put that missile through the window, and that killed Haniyeh and his guard. There are pros and cons to this theory, though I'm more inclined to believe this one. But photographs of that blast site where that room had been blasted showed that the kind of pattern of destruction on that building was more as if a bomb had been planted inside, and the blast wave had gone outwards. Now, how that could have happened, whether it was a delayed explosion or it had gone through a window and then exploded within, or that a bomb had been planted inside. And that led us to the third theory, that a bomb had been planted inside there 2 months ago by the Israeli Mossad. Now, this also has a number of loopholes, which, that is one of the most highly guarded, sectors of Iran, in the sense that it is the headquarters IRGC complex where they house their top guests, and I don't think that their security could be so lax that fairly strong explosive device could be hidden there and not be detected, that they don't carry out any sweeps of for searching for explosives, hidden explosives, etc. There are a number of loopholes in this theory too. But this is the one which is being given the greatest currency in the Western media, in the Israeli media. The simple fact is, whichever way the Israelis did it, they are not likely to put that on the front pages of their newspaper, because they have assets to guard, they have secrets to guard, and therefore they will put out a whole lot of plausible set of theories to confuse, distract, and possibly mitigate Iranian retaliation. You know, the last time when Israel had retaliated for the Iranian airstrikes, they had just used a drone, and the Israelis said we don't regard it, the Iranians said we don't regard it as a strike because they have used a toy drone kind of a thing. They played it down so that they didn't have to escalate really. Nobody wanted an escalation then. Simple fact is, nobody wants an escalation even now. Not Iran, not even the Hezbollah, and not the Americans. They are definitely against an escalation. Escalation may suit Netanyahu right now, as it is being speculated, because it will help his political survival. But the simple fact is that even Israel has a whole lot of reasons for which it may have no option but to escalate. So, if escalation happens, what form would it take? You know, we had carried out a very quick, hot wash-up, as you can say, an analysis of the lessons learned from the Iran-Israel missile war, so to speak. 1st of April this year, Israel had struck the Iranian consulate in Damascus. Now, that is where a top-sec meeting was taking place between, the Brigadier General of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, along with his comrades from the the Shiite militias in Syria and Iraq, etc. There was this closed-door meeting being held. The Israeli 8022 signal intelligence units, which they are jointly manning with the help of the Americans in the Golan Heights, the Jolan Heights as the Arabs call it. From those Jolan Heights, they have been beaming down into Syria, and they had picked up the radio traffic which indicated that this meeting was to take place, and pinpoint they had it attacked. Most probably F-35 jets with standoff cruise missiles had hit this target, or it was the F-15Es high-altitude jets, again with cruise missiles, which had pinpoint hit this target and killed the Iranian Brigadier General, Now, the simple fact is that a consulate is sovereign Iranian territory, and Iran was hopping mad. It felt its sovereignty had been violated, and it had simply no option but that it had to retaliate, because it wanted to establish a deterrence regime in the Middle East, especially with Israel. Don't forget that Israel has been given total military superiority and a significant military edge over all its Arab neighbors. Even a combination of Arab neighbors, they cannot hope to take on Israel militarily and prevail, because that level of military superiority the United States has ensured, especially in air power. Now, the Iranians had for long been looking for a counter to Israel's air superiority, and then ultimately they came upon the solution of the Iraqis, the Scud missiles that they had used in Gulf War I and even to some extent in Gulf War II. So they have started building their missile program for very long way off. And today they are one of the major missile powers with almost over 2,400. Some people are even claiming 4,000, drones and cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. So when they were attacked on the 1st of April, they took 13 days to respond. The Americans tried to dissuade them, deter them. They sent their aircraft carrier. They sent the chief of the Central Command, General Corella, to Israel. They sent about 200 jet fighters of the Americans, the French and the British, who were sent there to try and help Israel beat back this attack. But Iran insisted that for the sake of its saving face, for this national pride, it had to retaliate, and it gave them 72 hours warning that we are coming, save yourselves, etc. And it attacked only 3 military targets. It didn't attack any civilian targets, attacked only 3 military targets: the Nevatim air base, from where this airstrike had been launched, the Ramon air base, and the 8022 signal intelligence unit on the Golan Heights, from where they had picked up the information to carry out this strike. 320 drones and missiles were fired, which included 170 Shahid drones, the kind that Russia has been using against Ukraine, but it has retrofitted them with the GLONASS satellite navigation system instead of the GPS navigation system of the Americans, which can be spoofed, which can be blocked by the Americans whenever they want, right? So they used about 170 of these drones, and the bulk of them were shot down by 200 American, British and French fighter jets operating over Syria and Iraq, etc. And they shot down these, these drone swarms even as they were coming in. They are very slow moving, move at about 120 kilometers per hour, 80 kilometers per hour, and they took about 4 to 5 hours to reach. They had been picked up the moment they were launched, and the American satellites had picked that up, launch, and they were all set. Biden had moved to the National Security Council, which had been activated to monitor this and the American assisted Israeli response. Then just about 1 hour before these missiles were to reach, these drones were reaching their targets, the Israelis fired about 30 Pave cruise missiles. Job of these cruise missiles is to go and home in onto the radars, air defense radars that light up in the face of this swarm, drone swarm, and they hit those radars to sort of stymie the air defense radars, guidance radar capabilities, etc. And it is said that they did hit Iron Dome battery. Then finally, just minutes, about 10 to 15 minutes before the drones were to reach targets, 0 hour kind of a thing, they fired 130 of these Shahab missiles, intermediate range ballistic missiles of 2,000 plus kilometer range with a very heavy warhead. And the Americans and the Israelis claimed that they had shot down about 98%, 99% of these drones come missiles, but about 2 to 3% did get through. Most of the 2 to 3% that got through were the Shahab missiles with the heavier warheads. 5 hit the Nevatim air base. Some hit the Ramon air base, and they cratered the runway. They hit the logistic facilities, ammunition storage and oil storage, etc. And they did do damage, significant damage. And that is what surprised the world, because this is one of the world's best defended spots on planet Earth in terms of air defense, in terms of ballistic missile defense. It was integrated with the American ballistic missile defense headquarters in Colorado. But the fact of the matter is that they still got through. So whatever shape the Iranian retaliation will take will largely conform to the precedent and the model set by the 13th April missile strike. What are Iran's options? One is maximum response. A response that Iran, along with the 3 H's, the Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Hamas, and the Shia militias in Syria and Iraq will launch a massive strike, and this time against the political headquarters, the military headquarters from where these orders came for this Haniyeh killing. They would be struck in Israel, in Haifa, etc., etc. Maximal damage strike, possibly with 1,500 drones and missiles, to ensure that a fair amount of them do get through. The problem with this kind of a response, a massive response theory, is that Israel will hit back hard, and in this kind of a scenario, perhaps, even though the United States has said, we will defend Israel, but we will not take part in any retaliatory action. But if Iran's strike is so big, then they might be involved in the counter strikes, and that could do serious damage to Iran. Iran is keen to bring up its economy, get outside the sanction era, and gain political, geopolitical significance and leverage in the world, in the Middle East, join the BRICS, join the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, maximize its international standing, etc. It's not keen to get into a shooting war which will destroy its economy. If nothing else, it will destroy the Iranian economy. The Americans could hit all the strategic ports, the nuclear installation, and what have you. So that's number one option, the maximal option, which Iran is not at all likely to take. The very fact that it has delayed its retaliation so far, it has used the excuse that they are waiting. If there is a peace talks that work between Israel and Hamas, then it may not do this strike at all. And Israel, for its part, has that agreement, despite all the American pressure, has still not been reached. That is the ground reality. So, Israel has been threatening that if that doesn't happen, it will hit back, And the difference this time is that a whole host of Russian joint transport aircraft, the Antonovs, the Il-76s, have all landed on Tehran, airfield, bringing in electronic warfare systems to jam, likely cruise missile attacks by Israel. And they have also sent in the S-400 battery. Possibly this is one of the batteries that was supposed to come to India, that's gone to Iran, and it's gone complete with technicians and all that. And because I don't think the Iranians would be really in a position to man these batteries effectively. So quite obviously there are Russian personnel which will man these batteries, and this significantly raises costs for any retaliation, standalone retaliation that Israel may have planned. Even if the Americans get involved, this raises costs because the S-400 is pretty good, supposed to be touted as one of the world's best system. India has bought 3 of these, and with the help of this, they could pick up targets beyond 360 kilometers, and then they would be able to, they have long range missile, medium range missile, short range missiles, whole a plethora of engagement ranges and missiles at which they can shoot down anything from jet bombers to cruise missiles to drones and helicopters, etc. So this certainly does raise costs even for an Israeli counter-strike. The second option, as I said, is that Iran doesn't retaliate directly, but through its proxies, primarily the Hezbollah, to which it has been giving a lot of weapons and rockets and missiles to sort of increase the lethality of any attack by its proxies, right? Israel is supposed to have hit back and destroyed a storage dump of rockets and missiles of the Hezbollah, which Iran had recently supplied. But let's not forget that the Hezbollah by itself has a 100,000 rockets and drones and missiles, and especially a lot of unguided Katyusha missiles and other more sophisticated Iranian rockets and missiles, with the help of which it can play merry hell over Israel. Yes, they have the Iron Dome, they will be able to, but this would be almost super saturation, right? So, if that is the low level response or the scaled down response, which is what most probably Iran might opt for, if it doesn't want to, if it wants to preempt any full-scale Israeli and American retaliation on Iranian soil, well, then it may go for the second option or some other variant in between, where it hits and yet the hit is not serious enough to invite a devastating Israeli-American response. So what are Israel's counter-strike options? Well, Hezbollah has got a lot of political stake in not trying to have a war with Israel. Otherwise, it would have had it long ago. It's no longer just a resistance organization. It is part of the political setup in Lebanon. And to that extent, it's not keen to get economic devastation unleashed upon Lebanon. That state is already tottering on the brink, and they are not keen, the Lebanese people, to get involved in any major war. And therefore, Israel so far, it has massed its tanks, its troops. Israel is very clear that 70,000 of its citizens have been evacuated from northern Israel, opposite Hezbollah and opposite Lebanon, because of the threat of devastating rocket and missile attacks. It's already evacuated 70,000 of its citizens. How long can they be kept out of northern Israel? It will start harming their industries, start causing economic problems to Israel. So at a point in time, Israel will have to do something about it, right? Israel will have to do something about it, cannot accept it. And therefore, the normal Israeli response has been to take on its enemies one by one. So it has taken on Hamas. It's inflicted serious damage. Almost every house in Gaza is down, and about 40,000 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed. They claim, the large bulk of them civilians, etc. It claims to have hit the Hamas very hard. Unfortunately for Israel, the bulk of the Hamas leadership had gone into the deep down tunnels. Now, Israel has an artificial intelligence software named after a very pretty flower, with the help of which it can recognize facial. It's a facial recognition software. And they could pick out any time these leaders came out on top, but the leaders went underground and have started emerging from their tunnels like moles and rats only now. That is why you find a number of recent Israeli airstrikes on these people who have been emerging the leadership. Otherwise, they were not able to get the top leadership per se. They hit Haniyeh when he was in Tehran, and they have hit some people outside. They have hit Hezbollah leaders are operating in the open, and they are far more vulnerable to being picked up by this artificial intelligence software of the Israeli Mossad, and they've been regularly getting picked out and knocked out. They had number 2 of the Hezbollah military leader was killed recently in an Israeli airstrike. Israel's response option is that though it has now mobilized its troops, and as per Israel, it would be better to finish the war once and for all rather than demobilizing and then mobilizing once again. So it was expected that Israel would now launch a ground invasion of Lebanon once it had finished with Hamas in Gaza. And it has concentrated its troops there. That was the original contingency plan. They were preparing to do it even before the 7th October massacre happened, which was perpetrated by Hamas, and that was a surprise to the Israelis. But the fact now is that the Israelis have responded in terms of air power. Every single building in a 10-kilometer radius of the border with Lebanon have been knocked out. Every third building is down. Any building from which they could fire anti-tank guided missiles of 7 to 10 kilometer range into Israel, they have knocked all these buildings down. 6,200 plus sorties have been carried out by Israel for the devastation of the border area, with Hezbollah hitting back their rocket launcher sites, their command and control headquarters, their top leaders, etc., their ammunition dumps, their missile storage sites, etc., have been hit badly. So Israel might settle, instead of a ground invasion a la 1982, a la 2006, when they had launched a massive ground invasion, but they had taken heavy casualties because the Hezbollah was well prepared. They had fought back very hard especially with their RPGs, tandem RPGs, anti-tank guided missile. They had inflicted heavy casualties on the Israeli army. And so therefore Israel is also not keen for such a heavy casualty action of a ground invasion. But for the time being, they are going in for airstrikes, and that is how their retaliation will be confined to so far. The world is waiting with bated breath to see what happens. America is putting a lot of pressure to stave it off in terms of trying to get a Hamas Israel peace deal enacted. Israel is insisting upon two land corridors through Gaza. They are wanting them out fully, So it's been going on, negotiations. 6 hostages were recently, their dead bodies were discovered in a Israeli raid into Khan Yunis. So the situation is very fluid. Nobody is sure what form it will take, which way it will escalate. And this escalation likely here is coinciding with a major escalation in Ukraine, where Ukraine has invaded, has done an deep incursion into the Kursk Oblast of Russia proper. And things are on a boil there, and things are likely to get onto a boil here. The point to look for is that nobody wants an escalation, but will accidental escalation happen nevertheless? And if that happens, the world is in for serious economic consequences, because Iran is quite likely to retaliate, block the Straits of Hormuz, block shipping lanes, hit oil supply lanes, locks, sea lines of communication very badly, at the very least sent the price of oil skyrocketing, and that could be a very lethal blow to the global economy per se. We hope it doesn't happen, but then we are hanging on a prayer. We are all hanging on a prayer, and that is what the world can do, and hope and pray that things do not escalate out of control, both in Ukraine and the Middle East. And should that happen, would other actors, state actors, also jump into the fray? Would China deem it the right opportunity to sort out Taiwan or to deal with the Philippines? That remains to be seen. But the world is headed for very grim times. Thank you.